Live from London, this is The World Today.
Hello, I'm Paul Barber. Our top stories this hour. Reviving ceasefire talks as fighting rages across Gaza. Mediators are set to resume negotiations in Cairo. Anger boils over in Tel Aviv. Several people arrested as anti-government protesters clash with Israeli police. Carnage at a busy market in Syria. At least 8 people killed in a car bomb attack close to the Turkish border. And strengthening ties. Indonesia's President-Elect, Prabowo Subianto, arrives in Beijing for a 3-day visit. Gaza ceasefire talks are expected to restart in Cairo in the latest attempt to bring a pause to the conflict between Israel and Hamas. While fighting continues across the besieged enclave, Egypt is hosting an Israeli delegation after Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu approved a fresh round of negotiations. It's thought the talks will centre on a 6-week halt in Israel's operation in return for the proposed release of 40 of the 130 hostages still held by Hamas. The Palestinian armed group is not expected to be at the talks as it waits to hear from mediators on whether a new Israeli offer is on the table. Palestinian authorities claim hundreds of people have been killed during Israel's siege of Gaza's Al-Shifa hospital. Our correspondent Akram Al-Satari is in the southern city of Rafah.
Well, the most recent attack that took place a couple of minutes ago nearby Al-Shifa hospital took the lives of a specific number of Palestinians and also injured several others. We're still waiting for the news to confirm the number of people killed and the number of people injured. Al-Shifa hospital and the vicinity of Al-Shifa hospital have been witnessing heavy artillery fire for the last couple of hours, and the number of Palestinians is increasing. The number of people who are killed and injured is increasing due to that ongoing bombardment. Al-Shifa hospital is still besieged. The military activity is still ongoing inside the different departments of Al-Shifa, and the bombardment is continuous, hitting different targets around Al-Shifa, including Al-Mina neighborhood and also Al-Saraya neighborhood.
And Akram, a new Palestinian government has been sworn in. What more can you tell us about that, and how could it change things?
Well, the new government has around 8 Palestinian ministers from Gaza. They allocated some minister position for the Gaza reconstruction and rebuilding and relief as well. And that indicates of their willingness to engage in the humanitarian relief processes and include them within their political program for the years to come. However, this government came while the division has been overshadowing all the different political dynamics in Gaza Strip, East Jerusalem and West Bank. So they have still a duty to reassure the Palestinians and to let them know that Gaza, West Bank and East Jerusalem are united under the Palestinian Authority, and that government is coming to rebuild, is coming to reassure, is coming to represent united Palestinian community and to take them towards the Palestinian national goals. That is a challenge that needs to be addressed by the government, and this challenge is meeting doubt and skepticism by the Palestinians who are waiting to see what would truly be happening to them and to that government.
Our correspondent Akram Al-Satari in Rafah. Well, let's get the latest from Israel now, where it's emerged that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is to undergo surgery. Our correspondent Alex Cadier is in Tel Aviv.
Prime Minister Netanyahu's office announcing Benjamin Netanyahu will undergo surgery on a hernia discovered in a routine checkup in the last day or so. That surgery will take place this evening after he has concluded the meeting of the War Cabinet in Jerusalem. And so clearly Prime Minister Netanyahu will go under full anesthetic. We understand that the Justice Minister and Deputy Prime Minister Levin will take over the prime ministerial responsibilities when the Prime Minister is is undergoing that surgery. Just before coming on air with you, I was speaking to a medical source who said this is a routine surgery and should result in the Prime Minister just needing a couple of days of bed rest. But certainly that comes as the ceasefire negotiations are now ongoing. We understand the Israeli negotiators are on their way to Cairo, so very high stakes at the moment for the Israeli government, who for at least a matter of hours will be without the Prime Minister, Paul.
And Alex, certainly not the sort of time that the Prime Minister would want to be out of action, with increasing pressure on him, not least these anti-government protests last night.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And actually a remarkable moment, the first time that the families of the hostages who hold rallies and vigils every Saturday night joined up with those anti-government protesters here in Tel Aviv, saying that they were no longer going to hold rallies or vigils. They were going to start protesting, and a real shift in tone from the families of the hostages, many of whom who said that Prime Minister Netanyahu was an obstacle to their loved ones coming home. We heard from Einav Zangauka, who is the mother of a 24-year-old man being held hostage in Gaza, addressing Prime Minister Netanyahu. She said, "You are continually engaged in torpedoing a deal. You are the one who stands between us and the return home of our loved ones." So incredibly strong sentiment expressed by the families of those Israeli hostages. We also saw police dispersing some of the protesters, blocking the main highways here in Tel Aviv, using water cannons to move some of the protesters on. But certainly those were the scenes last night of real anger against the government in Tel Aviv. And today in Jerusalem, the start of a 4-day protest, anti-government and hostage deal protests as well, as we've seen. So really a lot of pressure on the Netanyahu government in the next few days. They will be having a tent city outside of the Israeli parliament for 4 days, putting pressure on the Israeli government to bring their loved ones home.
Alex Cadier reporting from Tel Aviv. In other news, at least 8 people have been killed in a car bombing in northern Syria, close to the Turkish border. The explosion struck a busy market in the town of Azaz in Aleppo province, which was crowded with shoppers. The area is controlled by pro-Turkish forces fighting Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. No group has claimed responsibility for the attack. Vote counting is underway over the border in Turkey in local elections that are being seen as a crucial test of power for President Erdogan. His ruling AK party is seeking to regain control of the country's business hub, Istanbul, along with the capital, Ankara. Both lost to the opposition in 2019. Analysts say the outcome could give an indication for the next presidential poll, where the current Istanbul mayor, Ekrem İmamoğlu, has been tipped as a possible candidate. Our correspondent Michal Badavid has more now from Istanbul.
Voting is underway here in Turkey, where turnout is expected to be high despite the election coinciding with Ramadan, as many voters are fasting. There's a lot of anxiety across the nation, with many analysts suggesting this election could be an indication of the country's political future. The campaign process has been intense, with the AK Party expressing a major show of force this week for their Istanbul candidate, Murat Kurum, as several ministers attended rallies with Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan. If the opposition's candidate, incumbent Mayor Ekrem İmamoğlu, wins Istanbul again this round, it would cement his position as a presidential challenger to Erdogan in the future. Istanbul is a soft spot for Erdogan, who launched his political career here as mayor in 1994. The city's massive budget of $16 billion also makes it critical economically. The AK Party is also hopeful of regaining control of other key cities that it lost in 2019, such as the capital Ankara and Antalya. While the opposition wants to mobilize disheartened voters following their defeat in last year's presidential elections, the AK Party also needs its supporters to turn out despite the economic struggles they're facing, with inflation near 70% and the Turkish lira at an all-time low against the US dollar. I'm Michal Bardavit for CGTN in Istanbul.
Russia says it's struck key energy and gas infrastructure across Ukraine, disrupting the production of weapons and equipment. The head of Kiev's largest private energy firm says 5 of its 6 plants have been damaged, and it could take up to 18 months to complete repairs. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky described the strikes as vile.
російські терористи.
Russian terrorists are now targeting such vile strikes to cause the energy bleeding of Ukraine. We gave all the necessary signals to our partners, all the specific requests to everyone who has the necessary air defense systems, to everyone who has the necessary missiles. America, Europe, our other partners, everyone knows what we need. Everyone knows how important it is right now to help us protect ourselves from these blows at this very moment.
And you're watching CGTN, still ahead. Once a refuge for many endangered species, Europe's biggest wetlands are now under threat from drought and over-farming.
Ever wondered what's the difference between a bear and a bull market? Where are the cash cows? And who are the lame ducks? And what exactly are black swans? Grey rhinos? And unicorn companies? Make sense of it all with global business, only on CGTN.
I think it should be more global cooperation.
I would like to hear more the voice of the developing countries.
Globalization has lifted more than 1 billion people out of poverty.
The green transition has to happen. It's a necessity.
Well, China and the United States are important powers in the world.
What unites us is much more than what divides us. And I believe China is committed to this agenda.
Join me, Juliet Mann, to set the agenda at these times every weekend on CGTN.
Events have consequences. Words create impact.
One more offensive in a long line of battles that's been ongoing for more.
Just got to be careful here with some gunshots. Excuse us.
The world today matters for your world tomorrow.
The number of casualties is growing quickly.
Why, this is one of the hardest hit towns in the region.
The world today, every day on CGTN.
Hello there, welcome back. A reminder of our headlines. Reviving ceasefire talks as fighting rages across Gaza. Mediators are set to resume negotiations in Cairo. Anger boils over in Tel Aviv. Several people arrested as anti-government protesters clash with Israeli security forces. And carnage at a busy market in Syria. At least 8 people killed in a car bomb attack close to the Turkish border. Indonesia's President-elect Prabowo Subianto has arrived in Beijing for a 3-day visit. The former general, who will take office in October, was invited by Chinese President Xi Jinping. Our correspondent Sunya reports.
President-elect of the Republic of Indonesia and the General Chairman of the Great Indonesian Movement Party, Prabowo Subianto, has arrived in Beijing for a visit that will last until April the 2nd. He has come at the invitation of Chinese President Xi Jinping. According to China's Foreign Ministry, Chinese President Xi Jinping will be holding talks with the President-elect, and China's Premier Li Qiang will also be meeting with Prabowo, and the leaders of the two countries will be exchanging views on issues concerning bilateral relations as well as issues of common concern. Now, Mr. Prabowo had chosen China as the first country to visit after being elected president, and this is reflecting the high importance of Sino-Indonesian relationship. China's Foreign Ministry also said that they expect this visit will be one that will further consolidate the traditional friendship between the two countries, where the two countries will also be aligning their long-term development strategy, and this visit will also help to create a relation that is a model relation between developing countries of unity, of cooperation, of common development. They also say this visit will also help inject stability in the regional and global arena. So yeah, CGTN, Beijing.
Japanese health authorities have searched a second Kobayashi pharmaceutical factory after the company reported 5 deaths, possibly tied to dietary supplements. More than 100 people have been hospitalized after taking the products containing red yeast rice, or benikoji. The supplement is advertised as helping to lower cholesterol. Kobayashi says it's cooperating with government officials. Salvage crews have started lifting the first section of Baltimore's collapsed bridge from the water. It's in an effort to allow access for barges and tugboats to reach the disaster site and reopen the city's blocked port. At least 6 people were killed on Tuesday when the bridge gave way after a container ship lost power and crashed into a support pylon. Canada's Niagara region has declared a state of emergency as it expects up to 1 million visitors for a rare solar eclipse. The area's iconic waterfalls has been designated as one of the best places to see the phenomenon, which is due in 8 days' time. It's the first total solar eclipse to touch the province in more than 40 years. Authorities say they expect the most visitors they've ever seen in a single day. Bulgaria and Romania have joined the Schengen area of free movement, joining the rest of Europe, travelling by air and sea without border checks. The admission to the zone comes after a 13-year wait, but the membership is partial. A veto from Austria means that the new status will not apply to land routes because of concerns over asylum seekers. Now, big changes are on the way for Europe's construction industry. The European Parliament recently approved a plan to cut energy consumption and greenhouse gas emissions in all new buildings by 2030. Our correspondent Pablo Gutierrez spoke to companies in Hungary which are already working on renewable technologies for the sector.
Thermal batteries could be the future of heating big buildings. Joseph Kakash is the CEO of Heat Ventures, a company in Hungary that makes thermal batteries for commercial and industrial buildings. He says green technologies like theirs could help the EU achieve its zero-emission goals.
A thermal battery, it means we can store cooling or heating energy from minus 30 degrees Celsius to 120 degrees Celsius.
The batteries work much like a thermos. Heat is stored in a liquid solution, in this case a bio-oil, and is released when needed to supply energy to the building's heating and air conditioning systems.
We can save 25% of the energy consumption of the chiller.
And that, he says, can significantly help reduce the energy consumption of large buildings when combined with effective insulation and heat pumps. That means heating systems like this one could soon be a thing of the past in Europe. The European Union has sought to ban them from all commercial buildings in just 6 years.
Buildings are the single largest energy consumers in Europe. We will not face the decarbonization and economic challenges and energy supply dependencies if we don't tackle buildings.
The Energy Performance of Buildings Directive, recently backed by the European Parliament, aims to make buildings more energy efficient and decrease energy consumption in homes. It also lays out guidelines for member states to renovate existing non-residential buildings. Buildings in the European Union account for 36% of the block CO2 gas emission. The EU says 3 out of 4 buildings are energy inefficient with poor insulation and outdated heating and ventilation systems. Experts say during Europe's energy crisis there was an increased interest in energy solutions, but that faded away as energy prices subsided.
Investment are a bit slower than it was 1.5 years ago.
Reducing energy waste and promoting greener heating and cooling options will save money for the owners of large commercial and industrial buildings, but it's also a step forward towards a sustainable future. Pablo Gutierrez, CGTN, Budapest.
Now, Costa Rica, in the heart of Central America, is a country famous for its beautiful environments, but it's also becoming an important player in international commerce. That's a trend that's been boosted in recent years thanks to a free trade agreement with China. Our correspondent Alistair Baverstock has more.
Costa Rica, a leading global exporter of pineapples. Around 85% of all this tropical fruit sold in the US and Europe comes from this Central American country. However, in recent years, Costa Rica's presence in the international market has diversified.
Years ago, we depended on fruit and coffee exports, but not today. Today, we have transformed into a service economy, technical support, call centres and foreign companies who establish operations here.
In particular, Costa Rica has specialised in the manufacture of medical instruments and orthopaedic appliances, exports reaching some $6 billion in 2022. Local resident Kevin Monge lost his lower right leg in a motorcycle accident 3 years ago, but thanks to his country's advances in prosthetic technology, he can still ride today.
I'm fortunate to live in Costa Rica because the country's technology in this field has given me this. It has a lightweight carbon fiber thigh and an articulated foot. Costa Rica has made a lot of advances in prosthetics for many different uses.
Analysts say Costa Rica has been able to develop its international market presence through free zone tax incentives to international companies, while providing investors with quality human resources.
Ours is a country that has invested heavily in education. Costa Rica has 5 public and 54 private universities for a population of 5 million people.
There is market demand for our students. The vast majority speak English and studied technical careers, leading many directly into the workforce straight after graduation.
Those are human resources of increasing interest to China since the two countries signed a free trade agreement that took effect in 2011.
The free trade agreement with China was key in tackling unemployment since it brought a lot of investment from Chinese companies.
China is helping Costa Rica continue down that development path.
China has given a lot of scholarships, and many Costa Rican students travel there to complete their studies in Chinese universities.
As long as Costa Rica continues to invest in education, this country will continue to be important in international commerce compared to the rest of Central America.
Alistair Baverstock, CGTN, San Jose, Costa Rica.
Spain's Doñana National Park is Europe's biggest wetlands, but the fragile ecosystem has come under threat from drought and over-exploitation of water. That's because of demands from a growing population, farming and tourism. Once a refuge for many endangered species, now Doñana is itself on the endangered list. Our correspondent Ken Brown travelled to southern Spain to find out more.
The Iberian lynx. Emblematic, enigmatic. In 2002, there were fewer than 100 left in the wild. Now, thanks to conservation and reintroduction efforts, over 1,600 roam free across Spain and Portugal. But the lynx is a rare success story, and Doñana National Park's world-renowned biodiversity is in real peril. Its aquifers and lagoons drying up.
Just look at the bird census numbers, for example. They're dramatic. Many of these species that used to spend the winter, nest and lay eggs in Doñana are suffering. We've never seen a situation this alarming before, particularly for amphibians and aquatic birds. The truth is, if things keep going like this, I don't see any future. There is no future.
This is the Acebuche Lagoon, or what's left of it at least. It dried up 5 years ago, eliminating habitat for a wide variety of species. In its heyday, Doñana would winter over 500,000 birds. This past December, only 70,000 were counted. The national park sits on an underground water reserve in an area almost twice the size of London. So why is Doñana drying up? This sea of plastic conceals part of the answer, according to Spain's World Wildlife Fund. Huelva province produces 98% of Spain's red fruits and around 30% of the EU's crop. But in Doñana, over 1,300 producing hectares are illegal. a space the size of 1,800 football pitches. Conservationists say water theft is killing Doñana. Farmers argue that this is their livelihood.
Around 80,000 people are employed directly by this type of agriculture in this area. 1 hectare of red berries provides full-time work for 10 people. We're talking about many towns around here with a lot of families economically dependent on this industry.
When the right-leaning regional government voted in 2022 to grant an amnesty to illegal farmers, it sparked an international outcry. Within days, more than 150,000 people in Germany signed a petition to boycott strawberries grown in Doñana. And Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez tweeted in support, saying climate change denial is destroying our environment. In November 2023, a $1.5 billion deal was struck between the national and regional governments, aiming at incentivizing the farmers to switch to ecological farming. But that's yet to be put in place. Doñana's wetlands and treasured biodiversity remain in grave danger of disappearing forever. Ken Brown, CGTN, Huelva.
Britain's King Charles has attended the Easter Sunday church service in Windsor, his first public royal event since his cancer diagnosis was announced in February. The 75-year-old monarch and Queen Camilla greeted well-wishers outside St George's Chapel, the resting place of his late mother, Queen Elizabeth. The King postponed all previous public engagements since Buckingham Palace announced he was to undergo treatment for an unspecified form of cancer. Meanwhile, tens of thousands of worshippers packed into St Peter's Square in the Vatican as Pope Francis led Easter Sunday Mass, the most important day in the Christian calendar. The 87-year-old pontiff has been in poor health in recent weeks, forcing him on repeated occasions to limit his public engagements. And the Sorb community in eastern Germany, one of Europe's oldest and smallest minorities, have held a traditional horse parade for Easter Sunday, donning old-fashioned frock coats and top hats. Riders carried religious banners and sang carols during the procession. The Slavic minority has been living in the area for over 1,000 years. And a final look at our headlines. Reviving ceasefire talks as fighting rages across Gaza. Mediators are set to resume negotiations in Cairo. And anger boils over in Tel Aviv. Several people are arrested as anti-government protesters clash with Israeli security forces. And that is The World Today. Thank you for watching. There's more news at the top of the hour. Coming up next, it's Reza Finaldo from all the team in London. It's goodbye.